There is a legend of a tunnel named Urashima. As long as someone enters the deepest part of the tunnel, they can have one wish come true, but must pay a tremendous price for it. The story begins with a transfer student. Her name is Anzu. Because she was incredibly beautiful, the boys in class all tried to win her over, but this made the girls jealous. They provoked her on purpose and threw her book on the ground. But this time, they picked the wrong girl to bully. Anzu punched the girl straight to the floor. Kaoru was stunned when he saw it. He didn't expect the girl he had just met a few days ago to be this bold. Just a few days earlier, Kaoru met Anzu while waiting for the train, but Anzu, soaked through by the rain, appeared particularly charming. Kaoru couldn't help but stare at her. Anzu, feeling uncomfortable from his intense gaze, used a sound with her mouth to remind him. Feeling embarrassed, Kaoru tried to offer her his umbrella, but Anzu thought it was a cheesy pickup line and rejected his offer. Still, Kaoru insisted on giving her the umbrella, saying that if she caught a cold, her parents would worry, but Anzu told him she didn't have any parents. Kaoru froze for a second, then said, "That sounds kind of nice." His response left Anzu speechless, but then, she quietly took his umbrella. Before parting ways, they exchanged contact information. Later that night, Kaoru was woken by noises downstairs. When he went down to check, he found his father completely drunk. The moment his father saw him, he furiously slammed Kaoru against the wall. But this time, Kaoru didn't silently endure the abuse. He ran away from the suffocating home. Kaoru was supposed to have a happy family, but everything fell apart after his sister's death. It all started in the summer. 5 years ago, Kaoru and his sister Karen had a small argument over something trivial. Karen wanted to apologize to her brother, so she climbed a tree to catch his favorite rhinoceros beetle, but she slipped and fell. By the time Kaoru returned home, Karen was unconscious. Their mother couldn't bear the pain and left the family, and their father turned to alcohol, taking out his anger on Kaoru whenever he got drunk. Kaoru ran through the night. Memories from years ago flashed through his mind. Before he knew it, he found himself standing before a mysterious tunnel. A strange red light shimmered inside. Kaoru's body suddenly began moving on its own, pulling him into the tunnel. As he walked deeper, red maple trees appeared all around him. Curious, Kaoru pressed on. The deeper he went, the colder it became. Suddenly, a shoe appeared in front of him. It triggered a flood of memories. He picked up the shoes and saw his sister's name written on the soles. He couldn't believe his eyes. After all, Karen had died 5 years ago. Just then, a parrot smacked into his face. It was singing the lullaby Karen used to love. Kaoru snapped back to his senses. He panicked and ran toward the exit. Once he got out of the tunnel, he gasped for air, holding the shoes and the parrot in his hands. He realized everything that just happened was real. Back home, his father heard him and came upstairs. He hugged Kaoru tightly, imploring him not to run away from home again. Kaoru didn't know how to react, but from his father's words, he learned he had been gone for a whole week. Yet Kaoru was sure he had only been gone for an hour. After his father left, Kaoru noticed his phone was dead. He charged it and turned it back on. As he checked his messages, he realized he really had vanished for a week. That confirmed it. The place he entered was the legendary Urashima Tunnel. The next day, Kaoru returned to school. His classmates were all curious why he had disappeared for a whole week. Kaoru could only lie and say he'd been sick. After school, he went back to the Urashima Tunnel. He stood before the red maple forest for a long time. But soon, he made up his mind. No matter what price he had to pay, he was going to bring his sister back. Just then, Kaoru suddenly noticed that Anzu had appeared right behind him. Once they were outside the tunnel, Kaoru explained everything to Anzu. This was the legendary Urashima Tunnel. It's said that any wish can be granted inside, but the flow of time inside the tunnel is completely different from the outside world. Anzu accepted this explanation, because when she entered, it was still daylight, but by the time she came out, it was already nighttime. So if someone stays inside for too long, they'll quickly be forgotten by the world. Then, Anzu made a bold decision. She invited Kaoru to explore the mysterious tunnel together, because Anzu also had a wish she wanted to come true. From that day on, the two spent a lot of time together, and everything about the Urashima Tunnel, they never told a single soul, because it had become a secret just between the two of them. A few days later, they returned to the Urashima Tunnel. This time, they planned to test the difference in time between the tunnel and the outside world. After days of research and trial, they finally came to a conclusion. 3 seconds inside the tunnel equals 2 hours outside. If they stayed for a full day, it would be equivalent to 6 years in the real world. Next, they decided to see if there was any cell signal inside the tunnel. After several tries, Kaoru discovered that phone calls wouldn't go through, but texting still worked. So he entered the tunnel again and immediately sent a message to Anzu. By the time he ran out of the tunnel, Anzu had just received the text. There was a time lag, but the method worked. Then, they decided to test further. Would someone inside the tunnel be able to receive a message sent from outside? But during this experiment, as Kaoru entered the tunnel, he witnessed something unbelievable. He saw Anzu moving at an incredibly fast speed. Startled by the sight, Kaoru quickly ran outside. Anzu was extremely anxious. She had been waiting for 7 hours, realizing this method wouldn't work. And with the sky beginning to darken, they decided to go home and rest for the night. The next day, they returned to the entrance of the Urashima Tunnel. This time, they decided to search for the tunnel's exit, but while climbing a slope, something unexpected happened. Anzu slipped and fell. Kaoru caught her in time, but their posture ended up being far too intimate, perhaps due to their long companionship. An inexplicable affection had developed between them. The following day, the two of them went to the library to research the legend of Urashima Tunnel, but they found nothing. After they left the library, under Kaoru's persuasion, Anzu made peace with the classmates she had fought with before. That evening, Kaoru invited Anzu over to his house. Maybe it was because of what had happened the day before. Kaoru kept stealing glances at Anzu, so much so that he got overly nervous. It wasn't until after Anzu left that he realized he forgot to say something important, so he immediately texted her, asking if they could go back to the Urashima Tunnel together during the upcoming 3-day break. From all the calculations Kaoru had done recently, he figured out that 3 days in the real world would give them 108 seconds inside the tunnel. But what Kaoru didn't expect was that Anzu would invite him first. She asked if he wanted to go to the aquarium together that weekend. That day, Anzu's outfit took Kaoru's breath away. He couldn't help but feel his heart skip a beat. They looked just like a couple on their very first date, but this date was more about getting to know each other better. Since they were about to enter the mysterious Urashima Tunnel together, that's when Anzu finally revealed what had been bothering her. That day, Kaoru's state had really scared her. Inside the tunnel, when he stopped moving, he began to appear ghostly and transparent. Even though he was standing right in front of her, she also felt like he was miles away. Then Kaoru told her the reason he went to the Urashima Tunnel, his wish was to bring his sister back to life, even if it meant trading his own life. Soon, the day came for them to enter the Urashima Tunnel. Once they arrived, they ran straight into the tunnel, but no matter how far they ran, they couldn't see the end. At that point, 54 seconds had already passed. Kaoru told Anzu it was time to head back. Just then, numerous sheets of drawing paper flew out within the tunnel. Kaoru quickly rushed forward to pull Anzu back. However, Anzu was already drawn to these papers, but at that moment, time had run out. Kaoru hurriedly crouched down to help her pick up the papers. After they finished picking them up, he grabbed Anzu's hand and they ran towards the exit. Fortunately, it wasn't too late. By the time they came out, only a few extra hours had passed, but it was already the middle of the night. Kaoru didn't dare go home, afraid of being beaten by his father, so Anzu offered to let Kaoru stay at her place. Anzu's home was simply furnished. Aside from a few appliances, the rest was a bookshelf full of serialized manga. Kaoru learned from Anzu that her grandfather had been a manga artist. Even though he was never famous, he kept drawing until the end, but her parents thought it was a worthless career. They even treated her grandfather like a burden. When he passed away, her parents didn't shed a single tear. Later, when Anzu told her parents that she also wanted to pursue manga, they were furious and kicked her out of the house. The drawings they found in the tunnel were actually pages from Anzu's very first manga. They had been ripped up and thrown away by her parents. She had no idea why those pages ended up in the Urashima Tunnel. Her wish was to gain the talent of a true manga artist within that mysterious tunnel. She wanted to create work that could amaze the world. After hearing all of this, Kaoru asked to read her manga. As Kaoru flipped through the pages, Anzu looked incredibly nervous. Kaoru praised her as he read, saying her work was amazing. Hearing someone acknowledge her for the first time, Anzu was so happy she stomped her feet in excitement. But then she realized something. Kaoru's wish was far more difficult. He was even prepared to offer his life in exchange. That must be why the Urashima tunnel chose him. Maybe it was the time they'd spent together these past few days. But Anzu had started to sense how special this boy was. She wanted to understand more about his world. They set the date for their next trip into the tunnel, August 2nd. Before that, there was a summer festival coming up. They made plans to go see the fireworks together. They walked through the crowd like a couple, eventually finding the perfect spot to watch the fireworks. Anzu asked Kaoru why he had chosen August 2nd. Kaoru said that August 2nd was the anniversary of his sister's death, and also the day his happy family began to fall apart. Anzu looked at Kaoru, then gathered the courage to take his hand. Maybe that was her way of trying to comfort him. When Kaoru got home, he saw a pair of red high heels. The woman inside quickly noticed him too. His father welcomed him in and happily introduced the woman, but whatever they were talking about, Kaoru couldn't hear any of it. His mind went blank. His breathing became heavy and shallow. The overwhelming emotions triggered a physical reaction. He couldn't accept what was happening in front of him. Somewhere in his heart, he still held on to hope that his mother might come back one day. The next day, as soon as Kaoru woke up, he received a message from Anzu asking to meet him. At noon, Anzu brought good news. Her manga had been selected by a publishing magazine. Kaoru looked at the delighted Anzu and suggested postponing their entry into the Urashima tunnel, as they couldn't predict what might happen once inside. Ultimately, persuaded by Kaoru, Anzu agreed to his proposal. While waiting for the train, Kaoru picked a sunflower from nearby and pretended it was an umbrella. Then he reenacted the moment when they first met. But in the end, they couldn't help laughing together. That night, Kaoru made a firm decision to delete all the texts between him and Anzu. Then, he put on his backpack and set out for the Urashima tunnel alone. The next day, when Anzu didn't receive any messages, she began to feel uneasy. She went straight to Kaoru's house. From his father, she learned that Kaoru had left the house the night before. Without hesitation, Anzu ran toward the Urashima tunnel. Memories of her time with Kaoru flashed through her mind again and again, but just as she arrived, she tripped and fell at the entrance. Maybe fate didn't want her to enter the Urashima tunnel. Right at that moment, her phone lit up with a message from Kaoru. In it, he expressed his apology to her. Kaoru believed the Urashima tunnel could only bring back things that were lost, but not something that never existed in the first place. So he told Anzu not to go in anymore. He encouraged her to keep chasing her dream, and maybe when he came out, he could still find traces of her in the world. At the end of the message, Kaoru wrote that the time he spent with her had truly made him happy. And so, through that message, he formally said goodbye. Anzu broke down completely. Reading the farewell message, she realized something. Kaoru had already taken root deep in her heart. Meanwhile, inside the Urashima tunnel, Kaoru didn't know how far he had gone. His strength had completely drained. Just as he was about to collapse, a light appeared in the distance. Without hesitation, he ran toward it. It turned out to be a glowing door, and on the other side was the sister he had longed for, Karen. Kaoru had returned to his childhood form. Karen showed him a beetle she had just caught, but then, with a single glance, Kaoru caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. He was still in his high school appearance. The next moment, his phone suddenly rang. Kaoru suddenly remembered he had already thrown his phone away, but when he opened it, all the messages he had deleted reappeared on the screen. It turned out, those texts between him and Anzu were actually the most precious things in his heart. Then, messages started appearing that were sent after Kaoru entered the tunnel, all from Anzu, though the messages seemed ordinary. Each one was filled with deep longing. Just then, Karen's voice snapped Kaoru out of his daze. At that moment, all he wanted was to stay here and live with his sister forever, but Karen told him not to let guilt trap him in the past. He had to carry his beliefs forward and embrace the beauty of the future. Then, another message from Anzu popped up on Karen's phone. Anzu simply asked if he was doing okay. Just a few words, but they carried all the weight of her endless longing. With Karen's encouragement, Kaoru finally moved his legs, which had long gone numb. Outside the Urashima tunnel, Anzu had already become a famous young manga artist, yet she still kept two umbrellas by her door. One was new, the other was rusty. Every day, She would pick up the old phone from over a decade ago to check if Kaoru had replied. What Anzu didn't know was, Kaoru was running while texting her, and just as he hit send, he suddenly fell hard to the ground. At that very moment, Anzu was sitting alone at the train station where they had first met, holding the old umbrella in her hands. Just then, the phone that had been silent for over a decade suddenly rang. She opened it in disbelief and saw a message from Kaoru. Without hesitation, Anzu ran like crazy toward the Urashima tunnel. When Kaoru woke up from unconsciousness, he found himself lying on Anzu's lap, just as he was trying to remember what happened before he fainted. Anzu suddenly kissed him. That kiss turned all their longing into deep affection. They hadn't seen each other in 13 years. If Anzu hadn't received that message, it might have been even longer. Inside the Urashima tunnel, messages from the outside world shouldn't be able to reach you, but it's a place where people can regain what they've lost. Maybe Kaoru hadn't realized it before, that Anzu had always been first in his heart, and perhaps that's exactly why her message managed to get through. Rain began to fall from the sky, and the two of them opened the old umbrella from 13 years ago. Maybe only people who truly love each other can endure 13 years of separation.